in South St. Louis, where we are reading through the Psalms in the course of 1 year, Psalm 1 through Psalm 150. This past week, though, our Psalms were Psalms 106, 107, 108. A few comments. First of all, Psalm 106 is a long psalm, and most of the psalm just recounts the sin of the people of Israel. The psalmist acknowledges that their current generation has sinned against the Lord, but then recounts all of Israel's sins, kind of a laundry list of sins, especially when it comes to the exodus from Egypt up into the time they entered the promised land and even worshiping false gods there. So in some of the highlights in that list of sins, we see this in verse 20. They exchanged the glory of God for the image of an ox that eats grass. So talking about Mount Sinai there, that they exchanged worship of the true God for a statue of a calf that eats grass. Then it goes on and it talks about how they went into the promised land and worshiped Baal and these other false gods of the Canaanites and the people who lived there in the land already. So again and again, the sin of the people, you hear that for a total of 43 verses until you get to verse 44, and then you have this word where it says, nevertheless. Nevertheless, he looked upon their distress and heard their cry. So even though the people sinned against God again and again, turned away from him, nevertheless, God still heard their cry. God still looked upon their distress. Verse 45, for their sake he remembered his covenant and he relented according to the abundance of his steadfast love. So God relents from punishment, from being conquered by other peoples, and he remembers his covenant. He remembers their promises, his promises to them, and relents according to the abundance of his steadfast love. So it's not the goodness of the people that motivate God to show them compassion, but it's just simply that God is compassionate, that God's a steadfast love, as we heard so many times in the book of Psalms, is never ending, never ceasing. So beautiful, because when we think of our own lives and our laundry list of sins, we know that God never abandons us. Not because we're good people, we're lovable people, but because of his love for us, that he is a loving God, a God of steadfast love. One other thing, just to mention from Psalm 8, in light of everything that God has done for us, what do we do about it? Well, lots of different things. We give God thanks and praise, of course. But in addition to that, I think it's interesting what's noted here. The psalm writer says this. The psalm writer says, I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. So giving thanks, singing God's praise, but where? Among the peoples, among the nations. And so in our thanksgiving to God for all that he has done for us, we also bear witness to the nations, to other people, to people who do not yet know God's great love for them, so that they too might know God's love, not just for us, but for them too, that they too might believe and join with us in rejoicing. God's blessings as you continue your journey